This is the interior of the Casón del Buen Retiro, since 1971 part of the Prado Museum in Madrid. In 1981, the whole building was adapted to house Picasso's painting Guernica and its related studies. Even 18 months later, the museum authorities claim that between 2,000 and 3,000 people come daily to see the painting, which for many Spaniards was, and still is, an emblem of anti-fascism. An emblem produced in the first year of the Spanish Civil War. Picasso completed Guernica and 45 studies between the 1st of May and the 4th of June 1937. He was in his 56th year. Apart from exhibitions, it was to remain at Picasso's request in the Museum of Modern Art in New York until such time as Spain regained its democratic liberty. General Franco, who led the nationalists against the elected Republican government during the Civil War, ruled Spain with an iron fist until his death in 1975, outliving Picasso by 2 years. The artist's legal executor was empowered to decide when Guernica could be returned to a democratic Spain. He took that decision in 1981. Picasso's painting has had a political significance, especially at the time it was painted and again in recent years. Why was it painted and what does it represent? When the Civil War broke out in July 1936, José Renau, Director General of Fine Arts in Spain, tried to enlist Picasso's support for the Popular Front, which had been elected to government in the previous February. In 1936, whilst remaining in France, Picasso was prepared to accept the appointment of honorary director of the Prado Museum, but he did not go to Spain to take this up. However, in January 1937, he accepted a commission to paint a mural with a subject and title of his own choice for the Spanish Republic's pavilion at the World Fair to be held in Paris that summer. Picasso's deadline was the 4th of June, but by the end of April he had not started work on the commission. On the 26th of April, the German Air Force, whose Condor Legion was supporting Franco, bombed and machine-gunned Guernica, the most ancient town of the Basques and the centre of their cultural traditions. The town, without defences or obvious military importance, was almost completely destroyed. 2 days later, in L'Humanité, the paper of the French left, Picasso would have seen this report. Even in the generally pro-Franco paper of the political right, Le Figaro, a picture of the destruction appeared on April the 30th. The Spanish Civil War forced many intellectuals in Western Europe, and particularly in France, to take sides on the issue of fascism versus democracy, or for some, fascism versus communism. For Picasso, whose hedonistic lifestyle in the 1920s and 1930s reflected his detachment from political or public events, the acceptance of the commission meant that the time of not taking sides was past. For his French friends, the threat was that if Spain followed the road of Germany and Italy, France would be surrounded by fascist dictatorships. Picasso could no longer ignore the situation in Spain. There had been rumours that he was pro-Franco, but in May 1937 he made the following statement, made public 2 months later. The Spanish struggle is the fight of reaction against the people, against freedom. My whole life as an artist has been nothing more than a continuous struggle against reaction and the death of art. How could anybody think for a moment that I could be in agreement with reaction and death? In the panel on which I am working, which I shall call Guernica, and in all my recent works of art, I clearly express my abhorrence of the military caste which has sunk Spain in an ocean of pain and death. Whatever else Picasso's painting expresses, it does not offer a documentary resemblance of Guernica's destruction. So how and why did Picasso arrive at this form of representation? We have two main sources to chart the development of Picasso's idea. 7 photographs taken by Dora Maar at different stages of the work. And the 45 dated studies. Although the first sketch of the 1st of May offers only general indications, we can see Picasso position the woman with a lamp leaning out of a building. In the second drawing, a bull and a horse appear. This is clearer in the 6th sketch, where a dead warrior with a spear is depicted under the bull and maimed horse. And in this study of the 8th of May, a mother and dead child appear on the right. On the next day, Picasso was certain enough to draw a full compositional study. By the 11th of May, Picasso had transferred the basic elements of the sketch to the huge canvas, roughly 11.5 feet high by 25.5 feet long. From early on, the main characters in his composition were established. The bull, the horse, the soldier, the woman with the lamp, the grief-stricken women, and the woman with the dead child. Why these characters to represent the destruction of an actual Basque town? Picasso's most immediate references were his own work, particularly from the 1930s. In 1935, Picasso worked on an etching called Minotauromachia. A main character in this fantasy is the Greek mythological figure, the Minotaur, half bull, half man. Traditionally, the Minotaur was used to symbolize the result of the overthrow of reason for the sake of animal passion. In the etching, the Minotaur uncovers a young woman, semi-dressed in the costume of a bullfighter. The girl is carried by a horse, traditionally the mount of warriors, kings and nobles, though the horse seems to stagger from a wound in its belly. On the left, a young girl holds a candle, often a symbol of purification, knowledge, and of the light of faith amidst darkness. Above her appear 2 women with doves. Apart from the references to mythology and to the surrealist emblem of the Minotaur, the exact meaning of the symbols and their relationships are unclear. Some commentators have talked of the symbols in relation to Picasso's attitude to passion and to women, his satire-like image and reputation. In Bull Disemboweling a Horse of 1934, there are references on the one hand to the Spanish bullfight, the corrida, and on the other to primitive passion and brutality, watched over by a figure holding a candle. In this oil painting, Bullfight of 1934, the mythological connotations of dark bull disemboweling a light horse are evoked in terms of the corrida. As the vocal cords of horses used in the bullring are severed, the pain they endure is silent. In Guernica, the format for Picasso's ambiguous symbolic system was modern history painting. Its scale and central compositional triangle evokes Géricault's Raft of the Medusa of 1819. Géricault's painting represents a scandal in French maritime history, the casting adrift in 1816 of over half of the soldiers and settlers bound for French Senegal on the flagship Medusa, which had run aground. Only 15 of the 150 survived thirst, starvation, and cannibalism. Picasso's painting, though, relies on allegory and metaphor, but not the kind of real allegory as in Courbet's Painter's Studio of 1855. Courbet needed to circumvent government censorship. He invited informed viewers to interpret his allegory as a moral and social critique of the years since 1848. A major question about Guernica is, why did Picasso employ allegory? The form that he would adopt was limited by the ideological rubrics available to him. These were largely defined by the characteristic of avant-garde French art to concern itself with the ambiguous relationship between what a private and a public imagery could express. This ruled out any possibility of producing a mural in a social realist style, like this triptych by Arteta. Picasso was also constrained by what was possible within the legacy of Cubism. He worked on the large canvas using bits of paper to mask out areas as though it was an enormous Cubist collage. And in the final work, the shapes are clearly based on Cubist interlocking forms. The central horse is distinguished by dashes reminiscent of decorative Cubist paintings. Even in one of Picasso's most expressive studies, Mother with Dead Child of the 28th of May 1937, collaged real hair is used. The stake piercing the child appears in the final painting, but through the horse. Other studies show careful but intense working to produce a solution to a problem which Picasso had not faced before, the making of a thematic public mural. In the first of Dora Maar's photographs, we can see the raised arm and fist of the soldier lying on the ground. It's at the apex of the central compositional triangle. As you can see from Republican posters of the Civil War, the raised arm with clenched fist was a gesture of solidarity with the Spanish left. In the second photo, the raised fist was backed by a son. However, Picasso removed this emphatic political symbol, and the horse's head, which began as turned downwards, is used in the final painting to fill the space left by the removed arm and fist. Later, in 1945, Picasso claimed that the horse represents the people. This shift of symbols from an explicit communist salute to a private symbol of the people changes the emphasis of the painting, from an expression of solidarity with the communist left to a representation of the oppression of common humanity. Picasso did leave in, though, a detail that might be read as pro-communist. In the posters for the Council for the Defence of Madrid, the fist and sword were used to symbolize the strength of resistance. The soldier, or broken statue, holds a sword broken in two. This connection has to be speculative, as have any links to other Republican themes, such as the woman and the dove, or with posters representing the effects of war on women and children. Picasso saw Guernica as exceptional in his art practice. Again in 1945 he said, "If I were a chemist, communist or fascist, if I obtain in my mixture a red liquid, it doesn't mean that I'm expressing communist propaganda, does it? When people look at it, each person gets a different meaning from it, from what each sees in it. I don't think of trying to get any particular meaning across. There is no deliberate sense of propaganda in my painting, except in the Guernica. In that, there is a deliberate appeal to people, a deliberate sense of propaganda. The bull there represents brutality, the horse the people. Yes, there I use symbolism, but not in the others. We can see Picasso's use of symbols and propaganda by looking at the etchings which he agreed to produce for refugee relief at the same time that he accepted the Guernica Commission. He called this the dream and lie of Franco. In an accompanying poem, Picasso wrote, "Fandango of shivering owls, souse of swords of evil-omened polyps, scouring brush of hairs from priest tonsures, standing naked in the middle of the frying pan, placed upon the ice cream cone of codfish, fried in the scabs of his lead ox heart, his mouth full of the chinchbug jelly of his words." The Franco polyp, symbolizing monarchy, church and army, walks on a tightrope in a series that seems to borrow from Goya's series of etchings, The Disasters of War, produced in the early years of the 19th century. In the third scene, Franco wears a bishop's mitre, and in the fourth he is dressed as a woman, wearing a crown, mantilla and a fan, carrying the traditional conical image of the Virgin Mary, common in Spanish churches. The next scene shows an attack by a bull, probably symbolizing Republican forces. This shows how Picasso used imagery for different purposes. The bull always symbolizes passion, energy and strength, but sometimes for evil, other times for good. The Guernica mural was installed in the Spanish pavilion in June 1937, together with the other major painting commission by Juan Miró. At the World Fair, amidst the technological displays and the monumental Russian and German pavilions, the Spanish contribution seemed a modest expression of Republican struggle against fascism. Whilst many people were bemused by Picasso's painting, the political right and left were divided on ideological grounds. Predictably, the German guide to the exhibition reflected Nazi propaganda and their official line on nationalist art. The guide condemned what the Nazis regarded as degenerate modern art. It attacked Guernica without expressly mentioning its title as the work of a madman, a work suitable for a childlike mind. Many on the political left regarded the painting as a failure because it did not clearly appeal to a mass audience, nor explicitly represent a call to arms against fascism. In fact, some Basques tried to have Picasso's painting replaced by works by Aurelio Arteta on the Spanish Civil War. The Front, the Exodus, the Rearguard. Taking a lead from Soviet Russia, the communist left preferred an art of social realism, but so did the political right. When Picasso's Guernica was returned to Spain, this extreme right-wing journal reproduced the nationalists' reply. Painted in 1944 by Izquierdo y Vivas, it's a large-scale representation of a massacre of nationalist peasants by Republican militia at Paracuelos in 1936. When Guernica was exhibited at the New Burlington Galleries in London in 1938, the nationalists also showed a painting in the room next to it. By Zuluaga, it represented the relief of the Alcázar of Toledo. This may well have been so as to diffuse the growing publicity that Guernica was attracting. The debate continued in subsequent years. One author, Vernon Clark, wrote in 1941, "Picasso has revealed himself as the painter laureate of the wastelanders, of those who see with amazing penetration into the cruelty and contradictions of modern society, yet are unable to ally themselves with any of the forces that are deciding the issues of the day. He has preferred to vacillate at a time when vacillation is both dangerous and expensive. And Wyndham Lewis in 1940, on the extreme right, condemned the painting as a big, highly intellectual poster, uninteresting in colour and having no relation to the political events that were supposed to have provoked it. American artists and curators regarded it differently. When Guernica was included in Alfred Barr's 1939 show, Picasso, 40 Years of His Art, the painting was seen by many as a monumental extension of Picasso's Cubist and Surrealist work. Jackson Pollock was almost obsessed by the painting, even to the extent of working in references to Picasso's studies in his Male and Female of around 1942. For Pollock, Guernica was formally and thematically a successful critical painting because it offered the potential for a large-scale mural art that evoked the personal imagery of surrealism, and which was purged of social realism. Artists and intellectuals of the 1940s associated social realism with the communist failure to withstand fascism. For many who identify the potential for a social art within the forms of modernist practice, Guernica is used as a criterion of competence. But the problem will always remain that in order to express a public meaning, the imagery and symbolism used in a painting need to be grounded in some recognizable or understandable shared knowledge, not in private iconography or fantasy. The diversity of explanations for Guernica may derive from a discord between Picasso's personal imagery and a public one. But whatever the limitations of Picasso's imagery and the ideological constraints on the expressive potential for a public art in the modern period, it's difficult to deny the status of the painting as an emblem for Spaniards, particularly since Franco. Today, the painting is housed in one of the two remnants of the 17th century Buen Retiro Palace, built by Philip IV. The other surviving building is the nearby Army Museum. It contains the mothballed relics of Spanish militarism, including the massacre at Paracuelos and other paintings which glorify the nationalist cause. The two museums, which represent conflicting but deeply entrenched ideological positions in Spain, are guarded in one form or another by the military. Guernica, however, is subject to stringent displays of security. Plate glass and steel girders reveal the state's need to appear open to the emblems of dissent, whilst ensuring their cultural containment.
I met a